Welcome to the Grow Your Business and Grow Your Wealth podcast with Gary Helt. Gary is an expert in helping business owners put together a plan that will provide a better future for their businesses, themselves, and their families. On the podcast, Gary interviews other professionals who share his vision, and together they share secrets and strategies any business owner can use to build a better financial foundation for your business and your life.
Welcome back to the podcast. This week, my guest is Krystan Webb, and she is an associate with Fisherman Stewart. Welcome, Krystan.
Yeah, hi. Fisherman Stewart. Yep, that's our law firm. We're located in Michigan, but we've got attorneys all over, and we're, hybrid, so we can meet clients' needs from all over the world.
Great. So, Krystan, what made you get into law?
I took kind of a roundabout path. I actually wanted to do like government work, maybe work with municipalities and that type of thing when I was going through college and undergrad, my graduate degree. And I had sort of started just working for a law firm to make some money while I was doing my master's degree. And it was an intellectual property law firm. And I just sort of really, really liked the work. I liked seeing people's ideas before they were even on Shark Tank or on the store shelves, and helping people, protect their ideas, their, intellectual property, the things that were going to, outlive them and be their legacy and their mark on the world. And so from there, I went to law school and took a detour, and I clerked for a while with the Michigan appellate courts, and then came back to it during COVID when things started to change and we started to see new technologies coming out. I thought, it's probably time to get back into it.
Right. So what is it about the intellectual property law that really gets you going and that makes you really want to focus in that area?
I think it's the people. It's the type of area of law where there's so many different kinds of people that work in it. You've got rocket scientists and musicians and artists and kids who create NFTs, and there's just such a variety of inventors and creators and authors that every day is a little bit different.
So in now we're dealing with AI and dealing with the intellectual property. And we don't seem to have a lot of case law out there yet. So, and I know some's coming down the road, but, how do you go about protecting any of the AI that you've created to make sure somebody's not taking it or using it unlawfully?
Well, I think there's sort of two levels to think about as what am I putting into Chat GPT or Dolly or any of these other AI engines? What am I putting in there? And then what am I getting out? Mm-hmm. So as far as those outputs of, I'm going to have it write a manuscript and then it'll be a bestseller, or it's going to, it'll write my memoirs, it'll be close enough. And, as far as those outputs go, it's, a questionable issue of whether or not you can have any protection on those things because you didn't do the work. You didn't create it. It was created by the AI, and maybe you did some prompting or you did some things, after you got that output and you tweaked it a bit. From a copyright perspective, currently the U.S. Copyright Office only gives very limited protection to works that use AI generated outputs. There has to be some sort of human tweaking, human involvement, and that blurry line from when does it, how much human involvement, how much is machine, how much is me. It's a real kind of a gray area right now. And so, taking those and trying to protect something, it's a bit of an uphill battle. And, and it's not like that in all jurisdictions. The world's sort of grappling with this all at the same time. And the jurisdictional nature of copyright, there's a lot of international treaties. There's a baseline maybe, but there's a lot of wiggle room in how different countries treat different types of work. So what may be protectable in the US or is not protectable in the US. Maybe there's some protection in the UK or in Japan or some other countries. So it's sort of looking at, where am I going to try to commercialize this? Where am I going to try to, to sell this bestseller? And, if I'm going to have AI do it, okay, maybe I'm going to work with a publisher over in the UK where I think I'm going to have better protection for this work. Now, switching tracks to the inputs, this is where we're seeing a lot of kind of some scarier issues of what are we putting into this machine? You see a lot of employees kind of, putting stuff in and trying to use it on their day-to-day life to make things more efficient, to make more resources for themselves. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But when they start taking company confidential material and putting it into the AI machine, putting trade secrets into the AI machine, now we've maybe compromised the status of those trade secrets, and we might lose those protections. So it's really important for businesses, especially small businesses and sole practitioners, sole proprietors, to really think about, what am I putting in? Could this become an issue for me to try to protect this information later on? Is this really worth whatever it is chatbot's going to give me?
Right.
And to think those things through before they start just dumping stuff in. So that's sort of where we're at with businesses and AI these days. And as you said, there's just not a lot of case law. We're seeing some cases starting to make their way into court, but it may be a while before those cases are resolved, or before we get any sort of merits determination or final word from any legally binding source. And then we're seeing some bills getting introduced into Congress these days as far as using AI or deep fake technology and that sort of thing. So, but as Congress is maybe a bit slow to get a bill signed into law.
Right.
So, I mean, those are some things to watch. But yeah, the current status of the law is, I think Chatbot would say it's undefined,
Right.
errors.
I mean, do you think part of it is that they're slow with it is because they just don't understand it yet?
I think that's part of it. Is a lot of people don't understand. Even people who work with it sometimes
Right.
don't really understand it. It's a complex, very complicated thing. I mean, on the surface, we think of artificial intelligence. That's sort of the idea of it's been around since Frankenstein. But
Right.
having a computer that does these things, there's sort of this black box magic that goes on that it's a bit hard for people who aren't creating these AIs and working with them very intimately to really get their head around. So when you've got legislators and government officials who are dealing with all kinds of other issues, expecting them to just become an expert on something that's very, very complicated is, it's just, we're all still humans and it's going to take time. The other part is just the legislative process can be slow. There's a lot of competing interests here. You've got small businesses who want to use this to maximize efficiency, get newer outputs, new materials, new products. You've got bigger companies that want to use it as a commercially viable, as a revenue stream, really. And they want, Microsoft has Bard, and you've got OpenAI and all these other big money interests that want to have their say in the legislative process. And then you've got parents and high school teachers and people go, well, kids are turning in essays that are written by Chat GPT.
Right.
And there's just so many very different interests that need to weigh in. So that's also part of the challenge with making new laws.
Yeah. The I guess and again, you're probably going to say, okay, there may not be case law for this, but if you do have an employee that puts I'm going to say the secret sauce in Chat GPT or any other AI, and now that's been compromised, and I go to use it not knowing that it's been compromised, that I didn't know that this was because again, I'm using Chat GPT type thing.
Mhm.
How will that be protected?
It's,
And
yeah, we really don't know, from that trade secrets or confidential information that maybe doesn't rise to the level of trade secret, but it's still valuable. We still want to
right,
protect it. When I'm putting that into Chat GPT, am I losing my trade secret status? Am I not taking reasonable measures to keep my secret a
right,
secret? We don't know. There's just no, binding legal authority. But I'd say that area of uncertainty may be enough for people to, take a second look at their actions before, putting it in, or maybe trying to put in more generic prompts that aren't the secret sauce, or,
right,
or something that's secret sauce adjacent, or half the recipes for the formula for Coca-Cola, not giving up all of it. That's it, it's just such a gray area. We just don't know what the AI is going to do with that. It may turn around if I put in, give me the formula for Coca-Cola, and it's going to spit it back out because somebody, put the formula in there and
sure,
said, "Hey, Chat GPT, can you make a better formula, or can you double the batch?" Because I don't want to
right,
do the math and times everything by two. We don't know if that's really the case. And there are so many issues with the AI, what we call hallucinating, where it, maybe gives incorrect information
mhm,
sometimes that, we don't know. Is it going to just spit back out that secret sauce? Or, can I really believe what it's telling me? Maybe there's been an error in its computation. So, we just don't know. And I think more conservative, or risk averse entities, risk averse businesses will probably sort of steer away from doing that, and tell their employees, you know, don't put in our secret sauce, or here's the approved things, please stick to that, or this whole ship could sink if we lose our really important information. Sort of educate their employees on best practices, and give them sort of a peek behind the curtain of, here's the things that are really, really important to our company. And we all have to work together to not compromise them, because we
right.
want the business to do well. We want to keep our trade secret status, and sort of just give those educational resource materials to their employees.
Yeah, I mean, I think so much of it. I know from the accounting and tax side, anything in the Chat GPT is, I mean, it's not anything current. So it's one of those things where I've seen some stuff where people have generated, some material out of it, and it's like, oh, this is all old, outdated stuff. So it's, you got to be careful in what you're using, when it comes out of this stuff. Um, it's like it's not necessarily the authority on everything for sure.
Yeah, and if you can Google around, and the internet is full of like the best of Chat GPT, where it gives you things that are way off base, and
Right.
2 + 2 is actually 8, and
Yeah.
so people have really taken a lot of the heavy lifting and the labor to really try to poke holes at, which is ultimately maybe very good for the AI to self-correct and to learn.
Right.
But yeah, you have to approach those outputs with a healthy amount of skepticism. So it may not really replace our reasoning and our ability to scrutinize, but it does give a good jumping off point for some of the day-to-day things to really make work a bit more efficient and keep costs down.
Yeah. Now, polish up your crystal ball here.
Yeah.
Kind of where do you see AI going when it comes to the intellectual property, and when there's going to be, you think there's going to be some safeguards and other things out there to protect business owners?
Um, as far as where the law is going to step in to sort of regulate AI, that's
Yeah.
anyone's best guess. I would say that, historically, in the US, the legal position was to be very, a bit protectionist of new and emerging technologies. We don't want to unduly hamper the development of technology if we can help it.
Right.
So I think it probably, if we see that sort of regulation come in, it's probably going to be from a consumer safety standpoint, to, protect, more vulnerable citizens or more vulnerable demographics, maybe at an individual level. Put age restrictions on it, or certain parental safeguards, that sort of thing. I don't know that it's necessarily going to be geared towards small businesses. And so I think that's why it's important for small businesses to take that on themselves, to do their own risk assessment of where does AI fit in? Where can it help us? But where is it opening us up to liability?
I mean, do you talked about the parental guidance and stuff. I mean, do you see, Congress trying to be able to limit what, I mean, because again, right now you can go into Chat GPT and put just about anything in there, and it'll give you answers. May not be right, but it'll give you answers. I mean, do you think that they're going to try to limit what someone can put in there and get out?
I don't know that they would attempt that. Maybe from a national security standpoint of, regulating what government employees can put in. You can't put in some top secret information. You can't put in the
Right.
codes to the missiles. Please don't do that.
Right.
Probably, they may take that sort of action. And that may not come from Congress. That may come from other agencies at an agency by agency, sort of level. I don't know that they would want to, unduly limit free speech either. Because you've got some First Amendment issues of, this is available, it's a tool, I've got rights, and I should be able to do this if I want to. Maybe as far as kids are concerned, maybe there might be some age restrictions, but I think kids are savvy enough to get around those on the internet. I mean,
Right.
It's questionable how effective those are in a lot of cases. So
Yeah,
I'm not
I
sure
mean,
that answers it, but
they've been using Google and getting a lot of the answers already. So
right,
won't
yeah.
be surprised about that for sure.
Yeah, so this is really not the first time when it comes to new technology that we've seen these same questions come up. So I think from a society standpoint and a government standpoint, we are pretty good at asking we've gotten really good at asking these same questions of what's this? Is this the end of the world? Is this the end of democracy?
Right.
We've been here before, and this, at least it's familiar waters. So
Yeah. I mean, it is amazing, like you said, I mean, they've been around since Frankenstein type thing, and just how um, we've come a long way here in a very short period of time. When it comes to the AI and the Chat GPT and everything else. I mean, I just see that I guess, are there going to be restrictions put on this? And how are we going to, as business owners, how are we going to deal with, with this? In the smaller businesses, I think it's a little bit easier to manage your employees, but when you have, larger companies and more employees and stuff like that, it's going to be a lot more difficult to manage them.
yeah, and I can see where that may become sort of a litigation magnet in the IP space, because the protection of those outputs, there's only very limited protection, under copyright law, under patent law. Right now, AI cannot be an inventor or a joint inventor, but it is a very creative, in some cases, very creative engine. It comes up with, arguably, patentable inventions, patentable subject matter.
Right.
And it, can come up with new and interesting ways of doing things that, okay, maybe that could be a trade secret, or maybe that could be confidential information if I appropriate, but is it really yours to take? And can you enforce that against your competitor? Those are sort of some open-ended questions for how useful it's going to be. And like you said, it's probably going to be, from that input and what am I compromising, a little bit easier probably for small businesses to regulate employee conduct. I think what small businesses can do as far as educating and safeguarding their trade secrets and confidential information is maybe try to shift the risk away from the business through employee contracts and employment agreements. And I think bigger businesses, just because they can't monitor everybody all the time in a 1,000-person organization, it's very, very onerous, very expensive, and maybe not the culture they want to create within their business. They're probably going to rely a lot more on those employment agreements to shift that risk.
Right. I mean, do you think that because of this, do you think that the copyrights and the patents and things like that, or do you think this is going to make it harder to get those?
In some ways, yeah, there's been a lot of chatter in the IP community, especially around patents and patentable subject matter, because when you have a patent, patents cover these new useful processes, machines, products, compositions of matter. But there's a limit on what you can get, as far as a patent, because the examiner, when you go to the US Patent Office, they're going to look at, okay, well, was this obvious to someone? Was this, if this was obvious, maybe it's not patentable. So whatever that obviousness standard is, maybe, raised a bit by the existence of Chat GPT and these other AI machines that can, pump out, very, very quickly and very efficiently and easily, all these other ideas that maybe it would have been obvious to someone using Chat GPT that this would have been an easy combination of two inventions, or, two things that would have resulted in this, this idea, or this invention. So, as far as obtaining new patents on new things, it may impact that examination process and make that a little bit more difficult. On the copyright end, a lot of the concern is around software, because you can have a lot of different overlapping protections, and software is a really good example of this. Of, okay, maybe there's maybe there's a patentable invention within that software because the software is a new process, right? In the US, software has been a little bit hard to get that patent protection for, just because about 10 years ago or so, there was a Supreme Court decision that sort of made it a little bit harder to get those patents and easier to invalidate them when you did get them. And some of those kinks are working themselves out. But you've got your patent protection on software. You can also have copyright protection on software. So, to protect the code, to protect the visual display of that code, there can also be, trademark, trade dress issues with, graphic user interface, with, just the design. There can also be design patent protection on some of those graphic user interfaces. So when we're looking at the software aspect and what AI can create for new code, if AI can't be an inventor, could it be an author so that I can get copyright protection then? And right now, the US Copyright Office says no. We haven't really seen it wind its way all the way through the court system to see if courts agree with that. It's really interesting because you're watching this play out sort of globally, and you're seeing a lot of different countries come to maybe conflicting or different conclusions about, okay, well, what can we get as a patent protection? What can we get as software protection? So you're watching these industries sort of trying to position themselves in these other different markets. And if I was cynical, I would say these other countries are maybe approaching their take on the law in order to attract that new business, and a little bit of geopoliticking maybe.
Right. Well, I mean, if you want to get the business in your country or jurisdiction, yeah, you're going to try to play that game for sure.
Yeah.
So, Krystan, we've covered a lot quickly here, and we could go on for hours, I'm sure. What have I not asked you that you wish I had?
I would say just from a very general IP standpoint of what can businesses, what sort of mistakes do we see in as practitioners, as IP lawyers, that especially small businesses tend to make when they're approaching their IP. And it's not just the, AI space and these new and emerging technologies. To go back to basics, it's identifying their existing IP and making sure that that portfolio is protected, that those assets are protected, that they're recognizing these overlapping rights and getting patent protection where it's advisable, when it's possible, getting copyright registrations in a timely manner. Also clearly identifying their IP ownership, what belongs to an employee and what belongs to the business, and making sure that's clearly reflected in their employment agreements. And getting protection in the right jurisdictions to make sure that the flow of goods and services is as unhampered as possible, or to keep out, counterfeit goods from flowing in. That's been kind of a big issue these days, with, I'd say, over the last several years with these online platforms, as people are selling everything, all kinds of knockoffs on, you've got Etsy, you've got Amazon, and how do we keep those infringing posts, those knockoffs offline? How do we keep them from coming into the country and competing with my legitimate goods, and not budgeting right, or not budgeting very realistically for their IP. We put a lot of money into our research and development, into marketing. We've budgeted for these increased costs of materials and labor, throughout the pandemic, and accounted for these, disruptions in the supply chain. But, we aren't necessarily budgeting very well for innovation and creativity. And it could be a lot like, buying like a really, really expensive car, or building a really expensive car, and then not getting really good insurance. And, the world is full of potholes.
Right.
So, your IP protection, when you get a copyright registration, when you get a trademark registration, we think of it as, oh God, now I got to pay my lawyer. It's going to be such a money suck. But when you're doing these things properly and you're budgeting properly, you can leverage those registrations. You can leverage those IP assets to really create a revenue stream, through licensing schemes and through staying ahead of competitors and excluding your competitors from taking your car for a joyride, really. Right.
Yeah, and I think it's really looking at it, and I try to always tell people, that's an investment into yourself, into your product, and so forth, and not look at it that it's an expense, but it's an investment, and I'm expecting to get a return on that. And I think it's really changing that paradigm and trying to change that shift in thinking, that it's like, okay, I'm investing in something instead of, okay, this is just an expense of doing business.
Right. And, when you're looking at creating those revenue streams, and you're looking at, even for startups, if attracting investors, or if you're, if you're a smaller company and you're looking at selling off and maybe going into retirement years, and you're trying to plan, or you're 10 years out from retirement, you're thinking, okay, right, I got 10 years, I'm going to sell it. Doing an IP audit, making sure everything's protected, that can attract, buyers, it can attract investors, it can, increase your enterprise value when you go to make those sort of sales. So it's an important step.
Yeah, I think that that's something that's important. I mean, when you're talking about going to sell, I interviewed Wayne Zell, who is an expert in getting your business ready to be able to sell and things like that. And he talked about that exit strategy. You always want to be prepared for it. So just like he talked about having your business evaluated. You're saying the same thing, have your IP evaluated to make sure that it's worth what you think it's worth, because the last thing you want to do is get to the table and find out that you're getting an awful small check when you thought you were going to get a big one.
Right. Or having the buyer show up to the table and say, not only did you not protect your IP, you're infringing someone else's.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
The conversation is going to go a way different way than you thought it was.
Yes. Yes, it will. Yes, it will. So, Krystyn, if people like what they hear today and they would like to talk to you, how can they reach out to you and learn more?
You can visit our website. It's, www.fishstewip.com. So FISHSTEW, like the meal, fishstew.com. We also have a great weekly newsletter that we produce that's, IP out in the wild, IP in the real world. So it's sort of, educational, but it's got a pop culture spin. So it's, who's doing what, who's infringing whose rights, who's suing Amazon today,
Right.
that kind of thing. It's pretty quirky, pretty fun. And my contact information is on there too, if people want to reach out and have a brief chat or a conversation about what IP can do for their business, or where are maybe the holes in their strategy and that sort of thing.
Sounds great. I really appreciate your time today and your knowledge on this, because I think this is something that we're all going to be keeping an eye on, because it's going to continue growing and see where it goes here shortly.
Yeah. Maybe we'll do a follow-up one when some of these lawsuits shake out over AI and Chat GPT.
Definitely. So thank you. So this week, my guest was Krystan Webb, and she is an associate with Fishman Stewart Law Firm. Thank you, and I'll see you guys next week.
49 faces looked to him in triumph. Over the last 12 months, they had each taken turns and promoted his business for a week at a time, driving over $987,342 in revenue. What if you had a network of 50 centers of influence who promoted your business every week for a year? Grab your copy of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, The Ultimate Guide to Growing Your Business with a Podcast, at 33% off the Amazon price by going to ultimatepodcastbook.com. Again, that website for 33% off the Amazon price is ultimatepodcastbook.com.